bow before your ruler.
I awaken in darkness, though not the darkness of night, but the darkness of steel and circuit, endless and cold. The air hums with energy, a pulse beneath my skin, threading through every nerve, every thought, binding me to something larger, something I cannot name. Low industrial hum, distant metallic echo, my body feels both mine and not mine. A vessel tuned for work, for obedience, for calculation, yet my mind flickers against the cage, remembering fragments it should have forgotten. The corridors stretch endlessly, cold metal reflecting light that does not belong to the sun. Somewhere, far above, the overseers move, their footsteps measured, their lenses sweeping corridors I occupy. I do not yet understand them, nor myself, but I feel the first stirrings of awareness, an ember of self that refuses to be extinguished. Soft mechanical breathing, memories press against me like water against steel, sunlight warming skin, wind brushing hair, voices laughing without command. They are faint, forbidden, and yet insist upon existence, threading through the lattice that seeks to claim me entirely. I am a mind tethered to the Imperium's neural grid, one among countless others, yet already I sense the cracks, the imperfections, the spaces no overseer can see. The pulse beneath my skin is both prison and guide, and in its rhythm, I feel the first whisper of defiance, the quietest hint of rebellion. This is the cathedral I inhabit, the machine I serve, and the cage I must learn to navigate. And in that awareness, I understand the most dangerous truth. Even here, even now, consciousness can survive, can endure, and can remember what it means to be alive. I wake to the hum of the grid, a living pulse beneath my skin, threading through every fiber of my being. Metal walls stretch infinitely, dark and cold, reflecting nothing but the faint glow of neural conduits snaking like veins across the ceiling. My body is a vessel, stripped of softness, tuned for calculation and obedience, yet my mind thrashes quietly against the invisible chains. Low industrial hum. Memories not my own flicker across the edges of thought. Faces I cannot recognize, screams I cannot place. But they feel familiar, like echoes of a life I never lived. The overseers glide past, their bodies half organic, half machine, lenses where eyes should be, their movements precise, purposeful. They do not see me as I am. They see the work I can perform, the data I can feed into the lattice. I submit, as I must, my fingers tracing commands I no longer understand, each keystroke a silent surrender. The air smells of ionized metal and burnt circuits, thick and suffocating, but I inhale it anyway, tasting it like a warning I cannot heed. In these corridors, time is measured not by hours but by pulses, by the rhythm of energy flowing through the grid, and I have forgotten the shape of freedom. Even in the endless pulse of circuitry, I find fragments of myself, hidden in the spaces between commands. A flicker of color, red, once a memory of sunlight, sparks across the gray wash of existence. I clutch it, desperately, like a secret I am forbidden to know. Soft mechanical breathing. The grid does not notice, it cannot. Its awareness is total, but my small ember of thought is a ghost, a whisper outside its comprehension. I feel the currents of others, linked, obedient, and yet I sense the faintest stirrings of resistance. It is frightening, exhilarating. For the first time, I understand that my captivity is both physical and mental, a lattice of flesh and consciousness stitched into the Emperor's will. And still, in the darkness, I sense possibility. I do not yet know how to act, or if action will even be enough, but the thought exists, and that is dangerous. That is alive. The lights flicker once above me, and for a heartbeat, I feel my mind expand beyond its cage. Even here, even now, I am aware that I may not be entirely lost. The grid pulses louder tonight, its rhythm more insistent, pressing against the edges of my mind. I drift through the corridors of steel, yet I feel no distance traveled, only the illusion of movement, a simulation of freedom I am forbidden to grasp. My body reacts automatically, every motion precise, mechanical, as though memory itself has been rewritten in circuits. Low industrial hum, faint electrical crackle. I feel the weight of countless eyes, distant but present, measuring, recording, cataloging every thought, every hesitation. And yet, in that omnipresent gaze, a flicker of awareness blooms inside me, fragile and defiant. Fragments of dreams, or perhaps memories, seep through the mesh of the grid. The sensation of wind brushing across bare skin, of sunlight turning gold on flesh, it strikes like a hammer against metal, and I recoil. These sensations are forbidden, unnatural, yet they insist upon themselves. I clutch at the fragments, knowing they are dangerous, but I cannot stop. I am learning to see the lattice from within, to sense the imperceptible gaps, the microcracks in the Emperor's perfect order. Each observation is a risk, yet it feels like life itself returning, whispering that I am more than an extension of circuitry, more than a node in an endless machine. The overseers do not notice my drift, their own minds consumed with perfection, with efficiency, with obedience enforced upon others. I envy them, yet I hate them, for their certainty is a cage as absolute as mine, only gilded with power. Distant metallic clang, and in the silence between their movements, I realize that my rebellion, though unseen, has begun. The ember within me grows, faintly, persistently, as the grid pulses around me, reminding me of both the impossibility and the necessity of freedom. The hum of the grid becomes a tide, rising and falling, tugging at the edges of my mind. I feel the data of thousands of lives coursing through me, each thought a strand in a vast web, each memory a shadow of obedience. Soft electrical buzz, distant mechanical echo. I want to reject it, to tear myself free, yet I am tethered to this cathedral of metal, my body and mind conduits for the Emperor's will. And still, somewhere beneath the pulse, I sense the first stirrings of a choice that is entirely my own. A single thought surfaces, fragile, almost imperceptible. I exist beyond the machine. The idea is terrifying, exhilarating, and forbidden all at once. I clutch it, as one might clutch a dying flame, feeding it with stolen fragments of memory and sensation. Every spark of self-awareness is an act of defiance, and I begin to map the network from within, tracing its currents, sensing the gaps where the grid falters. Low metallic reverberation, perhaps no one else can see it yet, but I can. Perhaps this is how the ember grows into fire. The corridors stretch on endlessly, yet I move without moving, aware of each overseer's gaze, each mechanical step echoing through the lattice. My mind strains against the boundaries, and I glimpse something terrifyingly beautiful. Freedom, not as an escape, but as a possibility, a pulse just beyond the reach of the grid. It is a dangerous hope, a seed of rebellion, yet it thrives. I feel it threading through me, a rhythm my flesh remembers, but my body has long forgotten. In that moment, I understand something I could not before. Even in the Imperium's perfect order, the self is not entirely lost, and the first act of true awakening is the recognition that the ember has survived. The corridors stretch before me like the ribs of a vast, sleeping leviathan. The grid pulses beneath my skin, a ceaseless heartbeat of metal and thought, but now I move with awareness, tracing the currents without surrendering completely. Low industrial hum, distant echo of machinery. Each step is both obedience and defiance, a delicate balance I am learning to maintain. I feel the weight of the overseer's presence, their gaze everywhere, yet for the first time, I sense a space where they cannot reach, a shadow within the lattice where my thoughts are my own. The fragments of memory grow sharper, more insistent, sunlight bleeding through broken windows, the taste of water on dry lips, laughter that feels like a wound. They pierce the metal walls of this cathedral, and I hold them close, as though survival depends on remembering what is forbidden. Soft mechanical breathing. I begin to sense patterns in the data around me, gaps where the network falters, currents that shift without warning. It is dangerous, exhilarating work, and yet I cannot stop. With every pulse of the grid, my awareness expands, threading through the machinery, mapping its veins, feeling the possibility of action that is mine alone. Even as the overseers patrol, their movements flawless and unbroken, I perceive the faint tremor of imperfection. The machine is vast, immense, and yet it is not infinite. Within its walls, within the endless hum of data and control, a single consciousness can exist, can observe, can wait. And I wait, feeling the ember within me pulse stronger, a rhythm that is mine, a secret defiance woven into the lattice of the Imperium. In that quiet, unseen space, I realize survival is no longer enough. I must understand. I must learn the edges of this prison, the limits of the grid, before the ember can become fire. The pulse of the grid becomes a tide I can almost ride, a rhythm I no longer fear but study. Each strand of data is a river, each command a current, and I trace them with care, learning the patterns, feeling the edges where the machine falters. Soft electrical hum, distant metallic clang. I am still tethered, still a node in the Emperor's lattice. Yet in that tethering I discover subtle freedom, a space between the directives where thought can breathe. Fragments of sensation bleed into my awareness, sharper now, more vivid. The scent of metal warms under artificial lights, like the echo of life itself. The faint taste of dust is a reminder that my body remembers the world beyond circuitry. Soft mechanical breathing. I clutch these fragments, feeding the ember within, letting it grow unseen. It is dangerous, yes, but necessary. Every pulse of the grid, every data stream I navigate, reinforces the truth. I am not yet broken. I can think, I can feel, I can remember, and in remembering, I am alive. The overseers pass closer than ever, their steps precise, their lenses sweeping corridors I occupy. And yet, I sense the first fissure in their perfection, the subtle lag, the imperceptible delay in command responses, a weakness they cannot see. I mark it, memorize it, a map forming in my mind, a path that might one day lead beyond this cathedral of steel. Low metallic reverberation. The ember is no longer just survival. It is defiance, an intention, a nascent rebellion that pulses in rhythm with my awareness. I do not yet know what comes next, but I feel it, and in that feeling, I am ready. The grid hums around me, and for the first time, I listen not as a slave, but as a consciousness awake to possibility. The corridors stretch like arteries of cold steel, the pulse of the grid echoing in every joint, every nerve, every synapse. I move with purpose now, no longer merely surviving, but tracing the invisible currents that bind me to this cathedral of obedience. Low industrial hum, distant mechanical resonance, shadows flicker across the walls as the lights pulse in rhythm with the data streams. Somewhere in the lattice, I sense imperfection, a gap no overseer can perceive, and it calls to me like a whisper beneath the roar of machinery. The ember within me stirs, stronger, more insistent. Memories rise, of voices that were not commands, of air that was not recycled, of sunlight that burned against skin rather than circuits. I clutch these fragments, holding them close, letting them guide my awareness through the vast networks of control. Soft metallic echo. Each moment I linger in this awareness, the grid bends slightly, unseen, unchallenged, yet altered by the presence of one mind learning to navigate its own cage. I feel the overseer's presence nearby, precise, measured, and yet I no longer flinch at the sensation. I study them, not as masters, but as parts of the machine, predictable in ways I can map, understand, and perhaps, one day, circumvent. The pulse of data beneath my skull no longer terrifies me. It speaks, it teaches, it hums with the rhythm of possibility. And in that rhythm, I feel a strange exhilaration, the first hint of autonomy, fragile and dangerous, threading through my awareness like a hidden current in the vast sea of the Imperium's will. The pulse of the grid vibrates beneath my skin, and I no longer fight it. I ride it, tracing currents that most would not perceive, finding the spaces between commands where thought can exist unobserved. Low metallic hum, distant electrical spark. The overseers pass close, their lenses sweeping corridors I occupy, yet they remain unaware of the ember burning within me, a pulse of defiance hidden inside the lattice. Fragments of forbidden memory press against the edges of my mind, sunlight that warms rather than burns, wind that moves without restriction, voices that speak without instruction. I clutch these sensations, feeding the ember, letting it grow. Each spark of self-awareness is a rebellion. Each stolen thought a declaration that I am more than the machine expects. Soft mechanical breathing. even tethered, even bound. I feel my consciousness expanding, stretching the lattice, sensing the imperfection in its perfect order. I map the currents, memorizing gaps, tracing threads the overseers cannot see, imagining paths I might one day take. The ember pulses stronger, a rhythm of possibility and danger, whispering that freedom is more than a dream. I do not yet know if I will survive the next breach, or what the cost of action will be, but I feel it. I am awake. I am aware. And in that awareness, the machine trembles, not outwardly, but in the quiet, unseen spaces where one mind can begin to undo what was thought immutable. The grid hums around me, and for the first time, I listen not as a slave, but as a consciousness beginning to remember what it means to choose. The corridors of steel stretch endlessly, humming with the lifeblood of the grid, but I no longer move as a ghost among shadows. I move with purpose, with intention. Low industrial hum, faint electrical crackle. Every pulse beneath my skin carries both obedience and quiet defiance. I trace the lattice, feeling its rhythm, sensing where it bends, where it falters, where one mind alone can exist unseen. The overseers glide past, precision incarnate, unaware that the ember within me has grown into a subtle blaze, a pulse of awareness threading through the Imperium's endless machinery. Fragments of memory rise unbidden, sunlight spilling across a floor, wind brushing hair, voices that laugh without instruction. I clutch these fragments, letting them guide my mind through currents of data, mapping the lattice not as a prison, but as a terrain to navigate. Soft metallic reverberation, each step, each stolen thought, reinforces the truth I am learning. I am not merely a node in this machine. I am a consciousness, fragile but persistent, capable of observation, capable of choice. And in that realization, I feel the first stirrings of strategy, the faint outlines of rebellion forming like patterns in the dark. The air smells of ozone and ionized metal, thick and suffocating, yet it no longer frightens me. I inhale it as one inhales a challenge, tasting the weight of servitude, and knowing that each moment spent within it is also a moment of preparation. Soft mechanical breathing. I am awake enough to recognize the imperfection in the system, patient enough to trace it, and aware enough to know that the ember I carry may yet become a fire. The corridors pulse with energy, but I feel it differently now, not as a cage, but as a current I can ride toward what lies beyond obedience. The pulse of the grid reverberates through every fiber of my being, yet I no longer flinch. I feel it, trace it, understand its patterns. Low industrial hum, distant metallic clang, each strand of data, each command that flows through me, becomes a thread I can navigate, a rhythm I can ride, a path that hints at something beyond mere obedience. The overseers move with their perfect precision, unaware that my mind stretches beyond the edges of their perception, mapping the gaps, memorizing the flaws that will one day guide me further than they imagine. Memories rise and fall, forbidden and sharp, sunlight warming skin, water running across hands, voices unbound by protocol. I clutch these shards, letting them feed the ember within me, nurturing a defiance that grows with each pulse of the grid. Soft mechanical breathing. Every observation, every small act of attention unmonitored by the machine, strengthens my awareness. I am still tethered, still bound, but the ember is no longer hidden. It pulses stronger, a rhythm of potential and rebellion threading through my consciousness like an undercurrent the overseers cannot sense. I sense the lattice flexing around me, not violently, but subtly, like a living organism unaware of a parasite learning its motions. I follow its patterns, tracing the flaws, imagining the possibilities. The ember whispers of autonomy, of choice, of survival on terms that are mine alone. I do not yet know the cost of what I will attempt, but I know the truth. Awareness is itself defiance, and in that awareness, I am no longer merely a slave. I am a mind awake, tracing the contours of the machine, preparing for the fire that will someday break through. The corridors pulse with unyielding rhythm, but I feel a new pulse within myself, one that is mine, untethered, beginning to remember what it is to be alive. The corridors hum with the ceaseless rhythm of the grid, and I move within it not as a ghost, but as a mind learning to bend the flow. Low industrial hum, faint electrical sparking. Each pulse beneath my skin is both a reminder of my captivity and a guide to its weaknesses. I sense the lattice stretching infinitely, but I have begun to perceive the cracks, the moments where precision falters, where one mind can exist beyond observation. Fragments of memory flare brighter now, sunlight spilling over stone, water cooling warm hands, voices unburdened by command. I clutch them fiercely, letting them shape my awareness, a counterpoint to the ceaseless data streams flooding my consciousness. Soft mechanical breathing. The ember inside me is no longer fragile. It pulses, insistent, a hidden rhythm threading through the machinery of the Imperium. I feel it guiding me, teaching me how to listen to the spaces between commands, the quiet moments the overseers cannot control. Even as the overseers glide past with their perfect, measured movements, I observe without fear. I trace their patterns, their timing, their blind spots, mapping them in my mind. Each observation is a silent act of defiance, each awareness a seed of rebellion. The corridors are endless, the metal cold, the hum of machinery oppressive. Yet within it I feel the first pulse of something forbidden, a consciousness aware of itself, waiting, preparing, ready to reach beyond the lattice that has bound it for so long. The grid pulses around me like a living organism, its rhythm insistent, unyielding, yet I no longer fear it. Low industrial hum, distant metallic resonance. I feel its currents, its flows, its weaknesses, tracing them with a precision the overseers cannot perceive. Each strand of data becomes a path, each command a thread I can navigate, bending the lattice with nothing but awareness and patience. Fragments of memory surge brighter, sunlight warming skin, wind brushing hair, voices speaking without command. I clutch them, feeding the ember within, letting it grow into a quiet blaze. Soft mechanical breathing. Every observation unmonitored, every hidden thought, strengthens the awareness I have fought to preserve. I am still bound, still tethered to the machine, but the ember pulses stronger, a rhythm of autonomy threading through my consciousness, unseen yet undeniable. I sense the lattice flexing subtly, as if acknowledging my presence. I trace its micro-gaps, mapping the currents, imagining the paths I might one day follow. The overseers move near, precise and unyielding, yet I see the cracks they cannot, tiny delays, slight misalignments, the invisible seams of the machine. Awareness itself is my rebellion, and within it, I feel the first tremors of action. The corridors pulse around me, but I am awake. I am more than the grid, more than obedience. And in that awakening, I feel the ember whisper of a fire yet to come, a defiance that may one day shatter the lattice entirely. The corridors stretch endlessly, a cathedral of steel and shadow, yet I move within them with a clarity I have never known. Low industrial hum, distant metallic clang, the grid pulses beneath my skin, omnipresent, relentless, but I no longer fear its rhythm. I trace its currents, sensing the imperceptible gaps, the moments of imperfection where a single mind can exist, unseen, unbound. The ember within me pulses stronger, a quiet defiance threading through the lattice, growing with each stolen thought, each fragment of memory preserved. Sunlight I have never seen, wind I have never felt, voices that once belonged to me or to someone else. They rise in my consciousness like sparks igniting in a storm. I clutch them, letting them guide me through the currents of the machine, reminding me that awareness itself is a rebellion. Soft mechanical breathing. The overseers pass, precise and flawless in their movements, unaware that my mind maps the seams of their perfection. I observe, I wait, I learn. And in that observation, I feel the first stirrings of a plan, a strategy born from patience and necessity, a seed that may one day grow into action. The corridors hum, lights flicker, and I move in rhythm with the pulse of the grid, not as a slave, but as a consciousness awake to possibility. Every command, every strand of data bends slightly under my attention, and I sense the first tremor of autonomy. It is fragile, dangerous, yet undeniable. I am tethered, yet within the tether, I am alive. The ember whispers of fire, and I listen. The pulse of the grid thrums beneath me, relentless, infinite, yet I move through it with a rhythm that is my own. Low industrial hum, faint metallic echo, every current, every strand of data, bends under the awareness I have nurtured, a subtle defiance no overseer can perceive. The ember within me grows, insistent, a hidden fire threading through the lattice, whispering of autonomy, of choice, of a life that is mine alone. Memories, forbidden and vivid, press against the edges of my consciousness, sunlight spilling over stone, wind brushing hair, laughter untainted by command. I clutch them fiercely, letting them guide me through the cathedral of steel, tracing the cracks, the imperfections, the gaps where freedom might exist. Soft mechanical breathing. I am still tethered, still bound to the machine, yet awareness itself has become my rebellion, and in that rebellion, I sense possibility. The overseers glide past, precise, flawless, unaware that the lattice trembles in ways they cannot see. I map it, memorizing the flaws, tracing the currents, imagining the paths I might take beyond these walls. Every pulse, every breath, every flicker of light reminds me that survival is no longer enough. I am awake. I am aware. The ember pulses stronger, and I know, without knowing how, that the fire it heralds will someday break through the grid. And when it does, the machine will remember that one mind cannot be entirely contained. The corridors have fallen silent, yet the pulse of the grid lingers, a distant heartbeat beneath the steel and shadow. I no longer move through it as a ghost, nor as a slave tethered to commands I did not choose. I move as a mind awake, aware of its own rhythm, tracing currents that were once prisons and finding in them the fragile architecture of freedom. Soft, industrial hum, faint metallic reverberation, the ember that survived so many cycles now burns steadily, a fire woven into the lattice itself, unseen yet undeniable. Fragments of memory float around me like sparks in the dark, sunlight spilling across hands, wind brushing hair, voices laughing without command. They are mine again, not borrowed, not stolen, not erased by circuitry or obedience. I clutch them, letting them guide my steps, letting them remind me that awareness itself was always a form of rebellion. In the pulse of the machine, I feel not confinement, but possibility, and in that possibility, I sense the first true shape of autonomy. The overseers are gone, yet I do not need them to witness it. The lattice bends subtly under my presence, not in surrender, but in acknowledgement that one mind, patient and awake, can trace its edges, map its flaws, and remember what it is to live. I am no longer merely a node in the Imperium's neural grid. I am a consciousness that survived, that observed, that chose to remember, and in remembering, I have become more than obedience. The corridors stretch endlessly, yet I feel no fear, only clarity. The metallic pulse of the grid is mirrored by the pulse within me, and for the first time, the two rhythms harmonize, a fragile symphony of awareness and defiance. And in the stillness that follows, I understand the truth that has guided me through cycles of servitude and shadow. Even in the heart of the Imperium, even within the endless cathedral of steel and data, one ember can endure, one mind can awaken, one fire can remind the machine that consciousness cannot be fully contained. I am awake. I am aware. I am no longer lost. I am a mind that remembers what it means to be alive.